Okay, hi, so in this video we're going to talk about cardiovascular disease. So, what is cardiovascular disease? Well, cardiovascular disease, they are basically diseases or conditions of the heart and blood vessels. Another common one is disease of the blood vessels which are supplying the heart. Right, so here it is written down. Cardiovascular diseases are diseases of the conditions of the heart and blood vessels. Okay, a common type is coronary heart disease. Okay, if you haven't seen my video on the heart, then please have a look at that to start with, because then you'll know what this means. Because the coronary arteries, okay, are the arteries which are directly supplying the heart muscle. Yep, so they are supplying the muscle with blood so that it can carry out its function, rather than filling the heart with blood to be pumped to the rest of the body. Now, if you have disease of those blood vessels, then that means the heart is not going to be working as well as it should be, and that is obviously a massive, massive problem. Okay, so I'll go into a bit more detail about how this works. Let's say you had an artery, right? So you've got an artery. Remember, the artery also has thick, smooth muscle and elastic tissue in there as well, right? So I'll draw that in as well. Okay, let's say this is an artery which supplies the heart itself. Okay, if you get deposits, because in your blood you can carry around lipids and things like that, right? And I'm going to draw those in yellow. If you have a deposit of fatty material in your artery, now that means that the lumen, or the hole in the artery for blood to travel through, is narrower, right? And so that's going to put stress on the blood coming through this way, right? Okay, and so what this is going to lead to, okay, so it leads to lack of blood supply to the heart muscle, meaning, let's go on here, meaning that the heart has less oxygen and can lead to heart attack. Right, so that is obviously an extremely dangerous thing to have. Okay, now there is a solution, or there's one solution which we use sometimes, and these are called stents. So I'll move this up here and start a new line here. Okay, so stents. Basically what they are is they're small tubes or cages, okay, which you put inside those blood vessels. And they basically, the role of them is to open up the blood vessel to allow more blood to travel through. Okay, so tubes, gauges which are inserted into the blood vessel in order to open the lumen and allow more blood flow. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Let's say we took our stent, and I'm going to draw it in grey because a lot of the time they're like metal cages. Okay, and you put it in like this. What's happened, I just rubbed out the fat, I'm going to draw the fat back in, is you push the fat thinner. Okay, so rather than it being a big blob which is stopping things from coming through, you've opened up that blood vessel using that metal cage or that metal tube, and therefore the fat gets pushed or squashed against the wall of the artery, and it opens up the gap down the middle, so it allows more blood to travel through the heart. Okay. So, this is a surgical procedure. Okay, surgical procedure. Okay. Oh, wow. There we go. Okay. With a relatively fast recovery time. Okay, so even though it is surgery and it's on your heart, the recovery time from that surgery is pretty quick, and then you can lead a normal life again. Okay, and they also, the stents last for a long time, and so you don't need to keep going back and having them replaced. Okay, on the downside, right, or on the flip side, there are risks. Okay, so risks, there we go. So operating on the heart may lead to heart attack / failure. Okay, which is obviously a massive problem. Yeah, also, there is risk of infection after surgery. Yep. And sometimes blood can clot near the stent, causing blockage of the arteries. Okay, now this is known as thrombosis. There we go. Okay, so that's known as thrombosis, and that can obviously cause severe problems and deprive the heart from oxygen even more. Okay, luckily the risks of that are quite low, right? Of all three of those things, the risks are pretty low, and so it is a procedure which a lot of people have done, and it is fairly effective. All right, now we're going to talk a bit about reducing the risk of this, because basically, in your diet, you obviously hear about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol on TV, on commercials quite a lot. Now, cholesterol can lead to more fats being deposited in your arteries, and so that is obviously a bad thing. So what we can also do is try and control our level of cholesterol. Okay, so cholesterol can lead to fatty deposits in the arteries. Okay, specifically, you have what we call LDL. Let me yeah, I'll just type it rather than draw it because my handwriting isn't very good. Okay, you have bad cholesterol is LDL cholesterol. Okay, and that stands for low density lipoprotein. Got that wrong. Low density lipoprotein cholesterol. Okay, now that bad cholesterol can cause problems. It can cause more fats being in the bloodstream, okay, increasing chances of fatty deposits. My spelling here is awful. Deposits building up and causing disease. Okay, good cholesterol, surprisingly, is HDL, right, which stands for high density lipoproteins. Okay, now these basically have the opposite effect, right? These, they remove bad cholesterol. Okay, so they remove bad cholesterol from the bloodstream, reducing fatty deposits. Okay, now these can be found in your diet, right, in certain unsaturated fats. LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, often comes from high saturated fat foods, okay, which are obviously bad for you. We do have a drug or a treatment which is called a statin, right, or statins, okay, because there are different ones. Now, statins basically work to reduce the amount of LDL, okay, so they're drugs which reduce the amount of LDL in the bloodstream, reducing chances of fatty deposits building up. Okay, they also increase the HDL content, increase HDL content of the blood, right, which obviously has the effect we spoke about previously. There we go, correct spelling again. And basically, these are taken by a lot of people in order to regulate the cholesterol in the blood to stop them from basically contracting any kind of cardiovascular problem, or developing, sorry, not contracting, developing any kind of cardiovascular problem or disease. Okay, but however, there are some disadvantages to statins. Okay, so statins, well, they're not a quick fix, right? So you have to constantly take them. Okay, so they must be constantly taken over a prolonged period of time in order to be effective, right? People could just forget to take them. It also is just inconvenient for certain people, right? But they have also been reported to have negative side effects. Yeah, so they have been reported to have negative side effects in some patients. Okay, these include things like things like liver damage, okay, headaches, nausea, and even memory loss, right, which is kind of worrying. So this can put people off taking them because obviously those effects are not ideal, and because they are a long-term solution, then they don't kick in immediately. You can't just take one course of statins and then expect your cholesterol to be perfect. It's going to take quite a long time to reduce your LDL cholesterol level in order to see the effects. Alright, now what about if the heart itself fails? Because what we spoke about so far is about the vessels which are supplying the heart, and we obviously need to regulate those and make sure that they're not getting blocked. The heart needs to be able to do its job. But the heart itself could actually be the problem, right? The internals of the heart rather than the vessels. Now, there are a few solutions, okay? One of those being a heart transplant, okay? So, heart transplant. Okay, this is major surgery, okay? Major surgery, very risky, could result in the death of the patient. Okay, if it's not done properly, or if just the patient rejects the new heart, then you have severe problems. Okay, also, finding donors is extremely difficult. Yeah, because obviously those people must have recently died. And you need to be able to match the tissue types and stuff like that, because we actually have an immune response to things like hearts and other organs which are donated from other people, because our body recognizes that it's not our own heart and it thinks it's there to attack us, and so it's going to fight that, right? And so that is a problem with being a donor of any organ. Okay, another alternative is an artificial heart. Right, now an artificial heart is as it sounds. It's basically a machine which is going to do the heart's job for it. Okay, so this is a machine which is going to pump the blood around the body instead of a real heart. Okay, usually short term until a donor is found. Okay, so usually this, like if you've had heart failure, you'll use an artificial heart just until you can find a donor to have an actual heart transplant, right? A few reasons for that. The artificial heart is not as good as a real heart, okay? So it's not as effective, okay, I'm going to put /efficient as a real heart, okay? And so things can go wrong, okay? Parts of the machine may wear out over time, or things like the motor could be faulty and fail. Right? Imagine how annoying it is at the moment if something like your phone goes wrong or your computer goes wrong. Now think if that machine was your heart. If your heart goes wrong, you can't just get annoyed and phone customer service. That's going to actually put your life at risk. So having a machine basically doing the job of your heart is a very risky strategy. Okay, on the positive side though, you don't have to wait for a donor. Okay, yep, so do not have to wait for a donor to have the artificial heart fitted, and body is less likely to reject as it is not a foreign organ, right? It's not an organ that's come from another organism, it's a machine, and so the body doesn't recognize it as containing cells, less likely to have an immune response against it. Alright, something else that can go wrong in your heart are the valves, right? The valves, remember, which separate the different chambers of your heart. So there's valves between your atria and your ventricles, and then there are valves going out of the ventricles into the the blood vessels, right, the arteries. Now these valves can go wrong, and if they are leaking, then it means that you could have the blood from the different chambers mixing. This is a huge problem because the heart works under pressure, right? The whole reason that atria contract and push the blood into the ventricles is so that you have a high enough pressure in the ventricles then to pump to the rest of the body. If they were just mixing and then the ventricles contracted, then you wouldn't have a high enough pressure to push it around the rest of the body, and that causes massive, massive issues, right? Now valves, you can get a valve transplant, okay? So valve replacement transplant. Okay, this can be human. This could be a valve from the heart of other animals, or it could be artificial. Okay, so the valves may be from humans. Okay, they would have to have died, of course. Humans or other animals. Okay, that could include things like cows and pigs, etc. Okay, we could actually transplant a cow's valve, heart valve, into our own, and it could actually work fine. Or we can use artificial valves, right? Now there are very similar problems to this as there were with the heart transplant, except just not as major, right? If you've got a reaction to a valve rather than a reaction to the whole heart, it's easier to deal with, it's less severe, but it could still cause massive problems, right? So the surgery is not as major, but there is still a very real risk of infection and of heart attack. Okay, so you still have all of those risks, which are not good. You can also have things like blood clots as a result, and that's obviously not ideal. All right, lastly, if we lose loads of blood, it takes us a little while to reproduce it. We can reproduce it, and we do reproduce our blood, but it does take quite a while. And so sometimes it's just not quick enough. And so we need something quicker. Okay, and that's where artificial blood comes in. Okay, artificial blood can replace real blood for a short period of time. Okay, it is not a permanent solution. Okay, not a permanent solution, but could suffice until the person has produced enough new blood to replace the blood lost. Okay, currently we have not been able to produce an artificial substitute for human blood which can work permanently, but there is a lot of research ongoing, I should say, in order to find one. Okay, so to find the substitute, we're looking at products which are able to do that. At the moment, we do not have the technology to be able to produce blood which is going to last permanently, but we do use artificial blood to keep people alive while they produce their own. Okay, importantly, and I should really say this, okay, if not, so if that person can't produce their own blood in time, then a blood transfusion may be needed. Okay, this is a risky procedure. Okay, so that will about do it. So that's all you need to know, right? We need to know what cardiovascular disease is, and we need to know how to treat it, right? That being using stents, using statins, and then if the heart goes wrong itself, we can actually replace the heart with someone else's or an artificial one. Okay, that's actually very, very risky, of course. Also, the heart valves could be the problem, or we could have just lost a load of blood and we need to replace it, right? All of those things are very, very serious, and so we need to be able to talk about the treatments and the pros and cons of all of those. So I'm going to stop there. I hope that's made sense to you. If you still have questions, please feel free to post them in the comment box below or send me a direct email. But I do hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe as usual because it really helps me and it means that you get notifications when new videos become available. But I look forward to seeing you in the next one.